So good morning, church. It's good to see you here. And for those online, I do hope you're staying safe and warm. So we will just get this underway. There we go. Now, as you know, most of you know that I work for an organisation called Creation Ministries International. And so it's my pleasure to talk to you today about what I think is a very important topic, and that is the creation evolution debate. And I thought we would look at miracles today, because of course last week was Easter, and particularly on Sunday we celebrated one of the greatest miracles, the resurrection of Christ. And this morning I want to look at 5 miracles that atheists have to believe in. And when I use the word miracle, I'm not saying that atheists literally believe in miracles in the way that Christians do, in a Christian sense. I'm talking about a strictly materialistic evolutionary view that requires belief in several events that have no known natural cause. Now, before we dive into that, I'll just tell you a little bit about Creation Ministries International. We have 7 offices around the world. We've been here for 48 years now, and we speak at approximately 1,000 churches worldwide every year on the topic of creation evolution. And our role is as an information ministry, in that we're not just about the science, it's actually more about helping you understand and share your Christian faith with those around you, those that you come into contact with in your daily lives. So I want to start with hands up. How many people have you been talking to, sharing your Christian faith, or just talking about your own testimony, and you've been challenged with questions like this? Did God really create everything in 6 days? Hasn't science proven evolution to be true along with its millions of years? Well, what about ape men? And the Bible never mentions dinosaurs. Well, how did all the animals fit on the ark? They usually laugh at that point. And doesn't carbon dating prove that the world is old? And where did all the races come from? And how about this one? Why does a loving God allow death and suffering? Now, hands up if you've had questions like that pushed back at you when you've been sharing your faith. And keep them up and look around the room. Because it's very, very common for people to use science to push back against our faith, to use science to show that the Bible is wrong. And that's why CMI exists, to answer those sorts of questions and help you with that information so that then you can go out and witness the truth of the gospel, the truth of the Bible, and so that others can come to know Christ just as we know him. And so our primary focus for now 48 years has been working with churches such as this in what we call linking and feeding. And that's where one of our speakers share the message of creation. We explain its relevance to the gospel message, and then we link people like you to the wonderful, often life-changing resources that we have available. And then you use those resources and that information in your daily interactions with those around you. And I just want to address the elephant in the room, because you would have seen the pile of books and resources over there. Well, let me tell you, I am not here to sell you a bunch of books. That is not how our ministry operates. We're actually largely donor funded. Just wonderful people like yourselves that continue to donate to us so that we can continue the work of going to churches throughout the world and showing that the Bible can be trusted. Now, one of these resources where you can find answers to an awful lot of questions that people have is, of course, our website. And I don't know if you know this, but if you say something out loud, you're more likely to remember it. So repeat after me, creation.com. With a bit more enthusiasm, creation.com. Yes, see, now I had you say it twice. So you're twice as likely to remember it. And if you go there, you will find an awful lot of information. There's 15,000 articles, free resources that you can answer just about anything and everything to do with the creation evolution debate. Now, the second point of reference is our Creation Info Bytes email newsletter. And this is a free resource that we send out to you every fortnight. And it has about 10 articles in it. And then you just read the ones that you want and the ones that you're interested in. And so what I'll do is I'll get my team to pass around the sign-up sheets as we continue the talk. And then if you'd like to avail yourself of this resource, you just need a few details, your name, phone number, postcode, and of course, an email address. And this is information that you can use to help your friends, your family, your whānau, your schoolmates, your work colleagues answer their questions. Because here's the thing. It's not our job to save people, is it? Whose job is it? God's. It's the Holy Spirit's. He's the one that saves people. And I find that very freeing in that I'm only called to be a faithful witness. And what's easier than passing on information through your computer with the click of a button? Because we can all share information. Because the thing is, the questions like the ones I mentioned earlier, they're often intellectual stumbling blocks to people believing in the truth of the Bible. And whether we realize it or not, the church has a problem. And it's been around for decades, and that is that we are losing the youth. So many young people that have grown up in Christian homes, regularly gone to church, are questioning their faith and the relevance of the Christian message. Now, perhaps you've heard of Barnard Research Institute. Recent surveys show that 2/3 of US youth raised in Christian homes are leaving the faith. And of course, we're talking about somebody else's children, somebody else's grandchildren, not yours, right? Well, wrong. Survey after survey in all Western cultures in the Western world, including New Zealand, show the same problem. Now, to look at this a little bit deeper, CMI went on to college campuses in the States. And they made this short documentary called Fallout. And basically what they did was they first located all the students that claimed that they had regularly attended church in the past. And then they asked them a series of questions. And the first question was, which do you believe? Creation or evolution? And not surprisingly, the majority of students said that they believed in evolution. And out of the hundreds of students surveyed, only 5 said that they still believed in creation. Then they were asked if they had been given any scientific evidence that supported the historical account of the Bible. And then every student who was raised in a Christian home but now believed in evolution said they had never been shown any information. And of the 5 that still believed in creation, every single one of them had been shown information. And then the last question, do you still attend church? And all those who now believe in evolution, all but one young man, said that they no longer attend a church. And of the 5 that still believed, they all still regularly and faithfully attended church. Now, people drop out of church for all sorts of reasons. It is a complicated issue. However, One of the major reasons given in survey after survey after survey is the apparent conflict between science and the Bible. Now, because of this apparent conflict, they are full of questions like, is there really a God? Does he love me? Or how about this one? Is the Bible true? And am I right that in this day and age, that last question has been answered with a resounding no? And the reason is because most people believe that evolution and its accompanying millions of years is proven scientific fact. And they believe that if that is true, then the Bible can't possibly be true. Just look at this quote from atheist Ernst Mayr. Evolution as such is no longer a theory for a modern author. It is as much a fact as that the earth revolves around the sun. Pretty bold statement. How about this one? Atheist Richard Dawkins once said this: evolution is as much a fact as the heat of the sun. Because he didn't want to repeat Ernst. So he had to come up with another one. But is that really true? Has the theory of evolution really been established and confirmed as settled science? And I contend the answer to that question is no, it has not. And the first thing we need to understand is that there are two different definitions of the word science. On the one hand, we have what's called operational science, or observational science. And this is the kind of science that's done in the present, right before our very eyes. And you might remember when you're in school and you use the scientific method. You develop a hypothesis, you perform an experiment, you make observations, and then you record the data. And then you can repeat it. And this is, operational science is the kind of science that brings us great discoveries, brings us medical advances, brings us technologies, brings us space travel, things that benefit us all. However, did you know that when we're talking about evolution, or for that matter, anything that happened in the past, it's not the same science? What we're talking about here is historical or forensic science, sometimes called origins science. And say someone here believed that a dinosaur over millions and millions of years of natural selection, random mutations, could one day grow feathers and fly. Now, if you believe that to be the case, can you do an experiment to show that's true? Can you observe it happening? Is it repeatable? And the answer is no, it's not. It's a different kind of science. It's in the past. We can't observe it in action, and we certainly can't repeat it. And then we also need to understand what we mean by the word miracle, because that word is often bandied about very lightly. Some might say that it's a miracle that the cyclone veered away and missed Auckland this morning. So what do we mean by miracle? Well, if we look at the Bible, now there's no actual definition in the Bible or the word miracle, but it's taken to mean something like this: that an act of God that reveals his power, purpose, and sovereignty over creation. And it's a shame that some people in the church elect to believe some miracles and not others. Now, belief in evolution comes from a naturalistic worldview. In other words, the idea that everything in this world, everything that we see, can be explained by matter, energy, and time. However, when it comes to the origin of everything, this naturalistic worldview repeatedly appeals to uncaused or inadequately caused origins, which essentially amount to a belief in miracles without a miracle worker. Or in simpler terms, A miracle is a supernatural event for which there is no scientific explanation using the known laws of nature. Take, for example, the resurrection of Christ. That is a miracle. But scientifically, using the known laws of nature, that is an impossibility. So today I want to look at just 5 miracles that atheists have to believe in when it comes to origins or forensic science. Oh, I must have bumped it. Miracle 1, the origin of the universe, in other words, the Big Bang. Miracle 2, the origin of stars, star formation. Miracle 3, the origin of life, often called abiogenesis. Miracle 4, the origin of the diversity of life, referred to as biodiversity. And miracle 5, the origin of meaning, morality, and intellect, in other words, thought. When we look at the order of creation in the Bible, specifically Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 to 27. We won't read that this morning, otherwise we'll be here till lunchtime. But I would encourage you to go back and look at these verses. Chapter 1, verses 1 to 27. It's quite different to the order according to the theory of evolution. Specifically, Genesis has the order of creation as follows. Day 1, God creates light, separating it from darkness to establish day and night. Day 2, a vault or sky is created to separate the waters. Day 3, dry land appears, separated from the seas, and vegetation and plants were created. Day 4, the sun, moon, and stars are placed in the sky to mark the time, seasons, and days. Day 5, sea creatures and birds are created to fill the waters in the sky. And then day 6, land animals were created, followed by the creation of humanity in God's image to rule and be stewards of earth. And then, of course, day 7, God rests from all his creation work. He blesses and sanctifies it as the 7th day. However, in the evolutionary model, the sequence generally follows this path, that we have the Big Bang, the formation of the universe and the sun, the early earth, the formation of planets, the cooling and appearance of water. Then simple life appears, single-celled organisms. Then complex sea life, multicellular organisms. Then fish, then marine invertebrates. Then we get a transition to land with primitive land plants, followed by insects, and then amphibians. Then we have reptiles, and the age of dinosaurs, and then the later appearance of birds. Then, and only then, we have mammals and humans appearing on the scene, which is after the dinosaur extinction. So man comes on the scene last. This, of course, is over billions of years, and man doesn't make an appearance until very, very recently. So it's a very, very different order than we read in the Bible. So it's easy to understand why people, especially our youth, are confused about which is truth. So let's dive in and have a quick look at these 5 miracles and see how they stack up against the actual evidence that operational science has. Miracle 1, the origin of the universe, the Big Bang. It's a great theory. But here's the thing, because the belief in the Big Bang requires a belief that the entire universe came from nothing, without a cause. In other words, no God, no creator, it just happened for no apparent reason. So here's the thing. Prior atheistic models treated the universe as eternal, so that they then didn't have to have a cause. It just kept going and going and going. That's now gone out of favour, and the current most popular theory is this, which was in Discovery magazine in 2022, The universe burst into something from absolutely nothing. Zero. Nada. And as it got bigger, it became filled with even more stuff that came from absolutely nowhere. How is that possible? Ask Alan Girth. His theory of inflation helps explain everything. Well, in fact, it helps to explain nothing. The theory of inflation, which requires a quantum vacuum and quantum mechanics to be in place first. So if they're in place first, you have to have matter and you have to have energy. So therefore, that means an eternal universe, and so we're actually back at square one. So rather than this theory of explaining everything, it actually adds 3 more miracles to the Big Bang. First, how did it start? Secondly, how did it stop? And thirdly, how did it break every known law of physics in between, which is completely unexplained? So the theory of Big Bang can be described as like this, that there is no space, no time, no matter, no energy, then suddenly there's a Big Bang. And we get everything that we see today. So why is this called a miracle? Well, the law of causation says that something cannot come from nothing. Nothing in physics explains why the universe exists rather than nothing. And so to believe in the Big Bang means that you have no explanation for the origin of the universe other than the fact, well, we're here, so it must have happened. And there are many, many other theories around. There is a theory called the multiverse, but that actually only pushes the problem further back down the road, and it doesn't remove the need for an ultimate cause. So believing in the universe just happened requires faith in an event without a sufficient or known cause, which is either clearly magic or a miracle. The second miracle, the origin of stars. Because atheism requires the belief that stars form naturally, despite multiple unresolved problems. Basically, star formation requires gas clouds collapsing in upon themselves. But if you spray a room full of gas, what happens to it? It spreads out. If you spray gas in a vacuum, what happens to it? It spreads out still. It doesn't magically reverse and fall in upon itself. So how do you get gases formed in a rapidly expanding universe to clump together to form a critical mass so that there is then sufficient gravitational attraction to reverse direction and then attract even more gases to it to clump together to grow a star? Well, those in the know invented this idea of a magical substance called dark matter. And it has Goldilocks properties. It is distributed throughout the universe just in the right amount and has just the right amount of gravitational force to attract hydrogen atoms together. And then suddenly we can have stars. And the fact is that operational science has been looking for this dark matter for decades. Failed experiment after failed experiment, and to date there is still no evidence that this dark matter actually exists. Then secondly, star formation requires the right number of supernovas or exploding stars that are close enough together to produce sufficient pressure to force hydrogen and helium, which were the first atoms supposedly made, together to form the heavier elements. For example, elements that you and I are made of, carbon. Just one. However, here's the thing. Supernovas are very rare events, especially multiple ones at the same time in close proximity. So this scenario requires a huge number of improbable events to happen for the vast numbers of the heavier stars that we know exist. I love the James Webb Space Telescope because it's showing surprise after surprise after surprise for cosmologists, because everything it is showing goes against the theory of the Big Bang. But it's in line with what the Bible tells us. Especially there's the early galaxies, which was a couple of months ago. They came out with great excitement and great surprise, because they are showing that these early galaxies at the start of the universe, at the start of the Big Bang, they are too mature and too complex for the theory. In other words, according to the Big Bang theory, they should not exist. But they do. So why is this called a miracle? Well, the mechanisms needed for star formation clearly contradict the known laws of physics, unless special conditions with magical properties are assumed. And despite that, the process is treated as inevitable, despite the massive problems reproducing it naturally. So believing that stars form spontaneously and consistently across the universe is clearly a belief in an unexplained, extraordinary event with no known cause. Third, the origin of life. Where did you and I come from? Called abiogenesis. Oh, we don't need the sound. This is a wonderful animation. It shows the internal workings in a cell. But atheism requires the belief that life arose spontaneously from non-living chemicals. That chemicals are what they call a primordial soup, for no apparent reason, started arranging themselves into long chains in exactly the right sequence. And that's a problem. Now, Sir Fred Hoyle, the famous astrophysicist, worked out that statistically, the probability of even one protein forming itself is the same as having the entire solar system full of blind people shoulder to shoulder with a Rubik's Cube, and they all arrive at the solution at exactly the same time. In other words, near impossible. So here's the key point. Life requires complex information. It requires what's called RNA and DNA. There is in every cell highly specific molecular machinery that makes it work. It's like a small city in every cell. And it includes error correction systems. So here's the thing. Chemicals do not and cannot naturally arrange themselves into coded information. And experiments show that lifelike molecules break down without intelligent control. So why is this a miracle? Well, because there is no observed natural process that generates information or produces self-replicating systems from non-life. So belief in abiogenesis, or belief in life spontaneously came from non-life, is totally contrary to all observational, observed science that we know. And so it's very obviously believing in a miracle of epic proportions. The fourth miracle is the origin of the diversity of life. Atheism requires
millions of different species,
the belief that all
billions
biological
of different
diversity
individuals,
arose from a single
and the
primitive
trillions of different
cell
characteristics they all have.
via lots and lots of time.
The total biodiversity
Billions of
of our
years,
planet is
lots
immense,
and lots of mutations,
which is a good thing,
natural
because the more biodiversity,
Now,
the
don't get me
more
wrong,
secure
natural
all
selection
life
is
on
a
Earth
fact.
is,
We can see that in
including
operation
ourselves.
science. I'm not saying
Only
it
when
doesn't
life is at
exist.
its most
It does.
varied, vigorous,
And in fact, it's happening
biodiverse,
all
can
around
we
us. But
hope
that
to
natural
thrive.
selection is not evolution. Now, Richard Dawkins, a famous atheist biologist, has spent his life trying to prove and deny that living things exhibit supernatural design. And he once said, biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. So the diversity of life is a huge problem for evolutionists. How can a microbe change itself into every living thing we see on Earth? From microbe to man. This is such a problem that in July 2018, 16 very high-profile, world-renowned biologists, they met in Altenburg in Austria because they had come to realize that mutations and natural selection do not explain the diversity of life. And so they had come together to discuss this crisis in evolutionary biology. And the only consensus after the meeting was that, yes, there is a major problem. In fact, it is a crisis. That was in 2008. And to date, it is still a major problem. It is still a crisis for evolutionary biologists. Because here's the thing. Natural selection can and does remove variation, but it does not add new genetic information. In fact, it narrows down the genetic variability in every species. Take, for example, dogs. Man has been artificially breeding dogs for centuries. And we have a great variety of dogs, don't we? We have Great Danes to Chihuahuas. But they're still dogs. No new species has ever been produced. And the other thing is that mutations are overwhelmingly harmful or neutral. There was a study that just came out. It's been done over the last 20 years where they cloned a mouse. And then they cloned the clone of the mouse. Then they cloned the clone of the mouse for 48 generations. And do you know what they discovered? It doesn't work. After the 48th generation, no new live mice could be born because the build-up of mutations, even in a cloned mouse, it was a dismal failure, which is probably good news, which means they'll probably won't start cloning humans, hopefully. And then large-scale changes to organisms, like new organs, new body parts, require massive increase in information. And there is no known mechanism for this to happen. Now, why is this called a miracle? Because there is no observed process that generates the required, needed increase in genetic information. The proposed timescales are insufficient given known mutation rates. 13.7 billion years is insufficient time. And complex biological systems depend on multiple interdependent parts, or what's called irreducible complexity. You cannot have one system without another. It all has to be working perfectly right from the start. Take, for example, a mouse trap. It's a very simple thing, isn't it? You've got a baseboard, you've got a spring, you've got a piece of wire, and you've got a hook that holds that until and a piece of cheese, of course. Without any of those 5 elements, that mousetrap is useless. Is it not? You have to have all those parts in place for that mousetrap to be working, to be effective. And it's the same with life. It's the same with you and I. So biological evolutionary change requires an information-creating process without a known mechanism. Or in other words, a miracle. And that miracle we know in the Bible. God created Adam and breathed life into him. And then the last miracle, the origins of meaning, morality, and intellect. Because atheism requires a belief that human consciousness, reason, morality, and meaning arose from unintelligent, undirected, and random chemical bonding of matter. The problem with this is best summed up by this quote from an astrobiologist who's not a Christian, Professor Paul Davies. How did stupid atoms spontaneously write their own software? Nobody knows. There is no known law of physics to create information from nothing. You can build the best computer in the world. But unless you also add an operating system into that computer, it is nothing more than a very big paperweight. And it's the same with life. We need an operating system. So the key point is that chemical reactions do not possess moral obligation. They do not possess rationality. They do not possess self-awareness. See, if thoughts were purely chemical, then there's no reason for us to trust them as being true. And if thoughts are only chemical, then morality or objective morality is impossible unless you have a moral lawgiver. So this is clearly a miracle, because meaning and morality are immaterial concepts. They don't exist as matter. And they do not arise naturally from matter in motion or chemicals bonding. And a purely material brain provides no foundation for truth or logic. So believing mind and the morality emerge randomly and unintentionally is clearly a belief in an uncaused emergence of immaterial realities. In other words, a miracle. Now, as you can see, both Christians and atheists believe in miracles. However, Christianity attributes them to an intelligent designer, an intelligent creator, God. Whereas atheism requires belief in miracles without a creator. Thus, a naturalistic worldview denying God relies on a number of extraordinary, unproven events that defy the laws of nature. Whereas the evidence that we have through operational science actually supports and affirms the biblical account of creation in the book of Genesis. Now, in comparison, the Bible makes it very clear that God is the creator God, right from the very first sentence in the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That is the very first miracle. You might be thinking, well, why is this important? What's the big deal? Well, 1 Peter 3:15 says that we should be in a constant state of readiness, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Does that sound like a suggestion or a command? It is a command for every Christian believer. So what about you? Are you prepared with an answer for your faith in the Bible, especially in the area of the creation-evolution debate? Because a lot of people think the creation-evolution debate is really just a bit of a side issue, that there are far more important things that we should be doing. Now, the truth is, it is foundational to the gospel message as well as every Christian doctrine in the Bible. And the Bible is a history book of what created, what went wrong, why we need to be saved. And if we consider our church doctrine today, most of this is contained in the New Testament, and it is based on the fact that the New Testament authors believed the creation events in Genesis to be real history. Over 100 times, the New Testament authors believed the book of Genesis, or referred back to the book of Genesis. Jesus himself referred to the creation account on 16 separate occasions. He believed about a real creation event, a real Adam and Eve, and a real global flood. But here's the thing, most people believe in evolution as their worldview because that's all they've ever been taught. The youth in universities and schools tomorrow will be taught evolution as a scientific fact. And our worldview is set by the time we are 13, and it's refined and honed through our teenage and early adult years. So think about that. If we know that in advance, respectfully, shouldn't we be doing a little bit more in the church and at home to show that the Bible can be trusted? Now, our beliefs about where we come from ultimately affect our worldview. And our worldviews are like a set of lenses or glasses through which we see and interpret the world, including our children. And it comes from a belief about where we came from. So if evolution is true, is there any ultimate meaning and purpose to our lives? No, we're just evolved pond scum, an accident of nature. What about what happens to you when you die? Well, there is no life after death. But if the Bible is true, then God is the creator. And that you and I were fearfully and wonderfully made in his image, with meaning and purpose. And that the decisions we make in this life, they're going to affect where we spend eternity. Do you realise that the answers to the questions, why we're here, where do we go, will always be determined by what you think about the number one question, where did we come from? And there's only two options. It's either creation or evolution. And these are foundational questions that everyone in the world has, Christian or non-Christian. And we need to equip ourselves with the biblical answers to these questions so that we can come alongside these people, answer their questions, or at the very least, point them to where they can find the answers so that they too can come to know Christ as their Saviour. Now, I've touched on a lot of information, and if you're anything like me, you might remember about 10% of the presentation and the rest is gone. And so I just want to be a little bit practical now, because if we know that there is a battle raging right now for the hearts, the minds, the souls of those we love, those around us, shouldn't we equip ourselves with the tools and ammo to defend the Bible, to defend our faith? Now, it's impossible for us to cover everything in one message, but I would be remiss. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you about the one resource where we get more testimonies of people coming to know Christ than any other, and that is the Creation magazine. It's been around for 48 years, goes out to 110 countries, comes out quarterly, there's no paid advertisements, and it's information that you can use to equip yourself, your family, your whānau, and then use it as an evangelistic tool. Planes, trains, automobiles, home, office, schools, anywhere and everywhere. You subscribe today, you also get a digital copy, which means that you can read it on tablets, smartphones, iPads, by everybody in your home. And we'll also give you a free back issue if you subscribe for 1 year. Subscribe for, going the wrong way, going for 2 years, and I'll throw in 2 free DVDs, One Human Family and Alien Intrusion. So the team are just handing around the sign-up sheets. If you'd like to just fill those out, take the sheet off the clipboard and bring it to the resource table afterwards, and we will get you sorted. And I just want to go over a few of the resources that we have. The Creation Intro Pack, great starter pack for every home. Contains the Creation Answers book, Refuting Evolution, and a DVD, Genesis, Key to the Gospel. You don't need a DVD player. It has a streaming option with it. The Creation Answers book. The Creation Answers book is the go-to resource. It has the answers to 60 of the 60 most commonly asked questions about creation evolution debate. Not forgetting the children. We have a wealth of resources for children. These packs, these books, I know that grandparents love buying these and reading them to their grandchildren. Theologians amongst you, this is a commentary on Genesis, chapters 1 through 11. It's also being referred to as the Rolls Royce of Genesis commentaries. And it's a fantastic resource. And talking about astronomy, this is a great one, Dismantling the Big Bang. It shows the scientific and philosophical weaknesses at the core of the Big Bang. And it shows that it only makes sense from God's perspective. Spacecraft Earth. We hear so much today about the universe, the life. It all supposedly came about by chance, time and processes. And this is written by an actual rocket scientist. And he challenges these events or these views by exploring what's required for us to exist in the universe. And Taking Back Astronomy. This is a beautifully illustrated book, and it looks at the accepted teachings around evolution and long-age assumptions, and has solid answers to such things as the speed of light, geology, the Big Bang, and it restores God to his rightful place as creator. And I love this book. This is a beautiful coffee table book by design, but it looks at the design of life on Earth, from cells to elephants. And it's a wonderfully illustrated book and very easy to understand. So I hope you can see how you can share and how you can equip yourself with the answers. Because right now is an exciting time to be a Christian, because we have the scientific and the biblical answers to questions that people have. And I want to conclude with this question. Are you willing to help the lost? Those that might be struggling, those that are seeking the truth and don't know where to turn, those that are full of doubts, hopelessness or despair because the world is telling them they are nothing special, they are nothing more than an accident of nature. Are you willing to equip yourself with the answers to those questions that people are asking, so that you too can fulfill the command, always being prepared to make a defence to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you? And of course, we do that with gentleness and respect. So let's just close in prayer and then we'll have the benediction. I'll just close in prayer first. Father, thank you for this opportunity to come around your word and show that right from the very start, right from the very first verse of Genesis, that we can put our faith and trust in your word. That you are the creator God. That you have our heart. And it is so good to be able to come before you to worship together as church and sing your praises. And so, Father, as we leave this place, I ask that you just put that excitement in our hearts to explore the Bible when it comes to creation, to equip ourselves with the answers so that we can come alongside people. They may be our friends, they may be our family, they may be just some random stranger. And just give us that knowledge and that wisdom and that information that we can come alongside them and speak into their heart, answer their questions, remove those intellectual stumbling blocks that they might have, so that they too may come to know you as their Lord and Saviour. And we ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen.